I'm Tony Perkins, and this is More Than a Game, the podcast that takes you beyond the box score and tells the Arizona sports stories you've never heard. On this episode, we hear from a local football legend who became famous for breaking up a motorcycle gang on what the sport means to him. But first, we learn about the University of Arizona's newest scholarship sport and its rise in prominence in the United States. There's a fast-growing sport that includes throwing, catching, downfield pursuit, and punishing tackles. It isn't football, but it is drawing attention in Tucson. Thanks to the University of Arizona's newest athletic scholarship program, the city could be North America's latest hotbed for rugby. In the fall of 1969, at a time when political and social turmoil simmered and boiled on college campuses across the United States, a student started something special at the University of Arizona. John Allen Schmidt, just back from a stint of studying in England, turned his fellow Wildcats onto a sport he learned while living abroad.
What a way to come out in your home tournament first match against the series leaders, the tournament champions.
54 years later, rugby at the U of A has grown from a college club craze to a sport in which student athletes have professional aspirations. They're coming to Tucson to take part in a program that's one of the fastest growing collegiate sports in the West.
Really, we're seeing club sports emerge here.
U of A men's rugby head coach Sean Duffy.
I've coached on both coasts. The West Coast is where it's at. I think just better weather. There's also a lot of really good teams. And there's teams that are on the rise.
Burst away in attack, and the first score came after half an hour with a glorious try.
American football's roots can be traced to rugby and soccer in Great Britain. A combination of the two British sports in the early 20th century created a team contact activity that grew so violent that U.S. President Teddy Roosevelt had to step in to keep players from killing each other. Rules were put in place to tone down the violence in America's rugby offshoot. In contrast, pure rugby was played without pads. This form of the land acquisition game put an emphasis on strength and conditioning instead of disabling collisions. Fast forward 100 years, and the sport boasts an unusual degree of variety. There is rugby union with 15 players per side, league rugby with 13 players per side. Rugby played on the international stage, dramatized in the 2009 movie Invictus, about the underdog South Africa squad that challenged for the Rugby World Cup.
Look in my eyes. Do you hear? Listen to your country. 7 minutes. 7 minutes.
There's also wheelchair rugby, rugby played in the snow, rugby played on the beach, women's rugby, and the massively popular sevens, which opens up the field to produce the quickest plays and the most exciting athletes, like American Perry Baker.
Is he going to take it 100? Baker! Oh, this is just unbelievable. He is the business. Perry Baker!
This modern game, with its massive international appeal, has sprouted professional leagues. Players sign contracts worth $1 million a year to play for teams in hotbeds like South Africa, New Zealand, and Australia. As with other sports, young athletes from overseas are enrolling in colleges and universities in the United States to train and develop their game. Again, Sean Duffy.
Between our fields, our training center, we already have great practice fields. We've already got great support when it comes to like medical and things like that. So we're very blessed to have what we have, and in many ways, you can see these students really being true student athletes. It's our guys, our men and women of the rugby program, really are paying to come here. They're paying fees. They're paying to be a part of this. And so we want to give them the best experience possible and try to give them as much of that sport as they want while still focusing on their academics, because that's the most important thing.
The Wildcats' top rivals on the men's side include Cal Berkeley and Brigham Young University. But with more schools like the U of A now offering rugby scholarships, the competition is turning more fierce every season.
There's going to be teams the next 3 or 4 years that are going to see this model that we're doing, and they're going to want to emulate that. I get calls all the time, and our thing is that's great because we know that a rising tide will lift all boats.
The money being offered for professional rugby isn't at the level of the NBA, the NFL, or the major soccer leagues around the world just yet. But observers of the sport say it's just a matter of time. And the elevation of rugby to big-time status at American universities will only move the ball closer to the goal. We now head to the American sport that rugby inspired. Type the name of the most standout Arizona football players into Google, and you'll get videos that sound like this.
And they're going to run it with Wiley, and he's got the first down. Wiley is gone. Michael Wiley, touchdown, Arizona.
Wilson gets a handoff into the end zone. Touchdown, Arizona, and the Cats are back in front. Now rolling left, hit from behind, fumble. Ball is loose, picked up by the Wildcats at the 15, at the 10, into the end zone. Touchdown, Arizona. Here's the snap. Scott throws. It is caught. Touchdown, Arizona. They have tied the game with 19 seconds to go.
But if you put the name Jay Dobyns in, the videos sound notably different.
I was part of the Hells Angels investigation, which we named Operation Black Biscuit, from 2001 to 2003.
I had set the stage for a murder.
The infiltration case ends, and then my true identity, like who they thought to be Jay Bird Davis, turns out to be Jay Dobyns.
Dobyns was a standout wide receiver at Saguaro High School in the late 1970s. He played a year at Arkansas before returning home for 3 years at the University of Arizona in the early 80s. Dobyns tried for a pro football career after his Wildcat days, but opted instead for a career in federal law enforcement. He became an agent for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, where he worked a number of undercover operations, including the one that brought him fame, an infiltration of the local chapter of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang. Once he retired from law enforcement, Dobyns returned to football, finding a spot on various coaching staff for local high schools. AZPM's Christopher Conover recently spoke with him about how the sport he excelled at taught him lessons that have followed him throughout his life.
Let's start kind of at the top. You were a football guy. I mean, you were well known in high school, came to UA. Tell me a little bit about your experience playing football for most of the time you were a kid.
Well, football had a huge impact on ultimately who I became as a person, my profession after my football days were done, like how I view life. Team sports and in my opinion, football are great builders and developers of all those things that you need in your life to be successful and achieve.
When you say team sports and specifically football really gave you life training, in what ways?
Well, you're part of something that's bigger than yourself. I was never the star on any team that I played on. I always was a role player. And I learned to embrace what my contribution to the bigger picture was. And I fell in love with it. I wasn't a guy who caught a lot of long passes or touchdown passes or received a lot of the glory for amazing plays. I caught a lot of short passes, got my head knocked off, caught passes when we needed a first down, and I embraced that. I loved it. I knew what my role was. I knew what I needed to do to help my team, and I was very content with trying to be the best I could in that role.
When you were in high school, I'm guessing you knew you wanted to play in college. For people who didn't have that athletic ability to know that they could go to a D1 school, how did you prepare? How did you get yourself mentally set for that?
Well, I was a very, very good high school player. I was a good college player, and I was a bad pro. And so every step you take, it highlights and exposes your flaws because the competition rises. And so every step I took my failures as an athlete became more and more obvious. But for me, I never had a plan B. I only had a plan A, which was to play football, to be the best football player I could be. And ultimately, when that came to an end, it leaves you, like a lot of young people, looking at yourself saying, like, man, I have not planned for anything other than what my objective was. Now what? Now what am I going to do?
You mentioned you were a bad pro. Now, people might not understand. Well, how could you be a good college player and a bad pro? Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I went to the 1985 NFL Combine, and I had a very successful college career, the one that I was proud of. So I go to the Combine, and my mentality was like, this is my chance to show off and to show who I am against the best professional candidates coming into the draft. I met a kid from Kutztown State that I'd never heard of. And I told him, where's Kutztown? I'm shaking hands with him. And he's like, it's in Pennsylvania. And I shook hands with him and slapped him on the back and told him, good luck today. Have a great workout. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm going to whip this guy's ass. There was another guy I met that was from a little school in Mississippi. Never heard of these guys. 10 minutes into the drills, these guys, these players that I'd never heard of, I could not do what they could do. They were bigger, stronger, faster, quicker, more athletic, more skilled. And so that plan A dream started fading, like literally 10 minutes into like my test drive, into where I thought I was really going to show off. Now, it turns out the guy from Kutztown State was a kid named Andre Reed, who played for 15 years in the NFL and is in the Hall of Fame and played in 4 Super Bowls. And the guy that was from the little school in Mississippi went to Mississippi Valley State. It was Jerry Rice.
Two guys who had some careers.
Well, at the time, I didn't know who they were. They turned out to be 2 of the most amazing football players to ever put on a helmet and shoulder pads. And so I wasn't judging myself against the fairest level of competition, but nonetheless, I realized I'm going to have to do something else to make a living because I can't do what these guys can do.
So you ended up with the ATF as an undercover agent. That's a whole separate podcast. But again, going back to what you said, talking about what football taught you and team sports taught you, how did that carry you through a very successful long career with the ATF?
Well, I was a federal agent for 27 years. During that time, I focused on undercover work. I was a part of over 500 undercover operations. I bought everything from pea shooters to shoulder-launched rockets, from street dope, dime bags, to cartel-level dope, from homemade PVC pipe bombs to servo-activated electronic IEDs. I worked on home invasion cases. I played a hitman in murder-for-hire cases. All those things that were a part of my ATF career ultimately had a tie back to my football days and back to the University of Arizona campus because all those same elements applied: hard work, toughness, resiliency. I came on the job on a Monday. I got sworn in. I raised my hand. I received my badge. 4 days later, I was taken hostage and shot in a neighborhood south of the Tucson airport that was known as Dog Patch. And in this shooting, the bullet went in my back. It went through my lung. It narrowly missed my heart. It exited my chest. So after 4 days, I'm laying in the dirt of this trailer park with blood coming out of my chest like you're holding your thumb over the end of a garden hose. And so those elements from football were right back and needed to survive that. Yeah, I was asking myself the question, what are you going to do? What are you going to do about this? Are you going to lay here and bleed to death and die? Are you going to get up? Are you going to fight back? Are you going to do something about it? That's not all that different than the experiences that an athlete goes through. A little more dramatic, yes, of course. But nonetheless, those same skill sets and that same mentality was at play.
After your career with ATF, you came back to Tucson. You were based here a lot in Arizona, but you came back to Tucson, started coaching, and until last year, coaching high school football. He ended up head coach out at Tanca Verde. What was that experience like, having been a high school player, having tried to go to the highest level, now coming all the way back down?
Yeah, I coached. I coached youth sports for probably 25 years when my kids were in youth sports. So, like, I was putting a ball on a tee, at T-ball for 6-year-olds, and coach pitch and all those things in youth football and flag football. I coached at Sal Point High School for 10 years under Coach Benet there. The last 3 years, I was the head coach at Tanca Verde High School. All different experiences and different demands on you as a coach. But the common denominator was, like, I was able to take some of these life's experiences and then try to translate them back to young people so that they could be understandable for them. And that was beyond teaching football skills and techniques and strategies and coaching a team. It was very personal for me. I wanted the kids that I coached to try to avoid the mistakes and the failures that I had experienced through life. And I told them repeatedly, you're going to make mistakes. That's life. You're going to get things wrong. We all do every day. But don't do these things. And these things were the things that, like, were embarrassing or humiliating or that I carry shame for. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. If you do this, I can tell you how it's going to turn out, and it's not good. And I'm telling you that from a firsthand experience.
It sounds like, and maybe people who don't play sports, don't think about this, but you weren't coaching as much sports as you were coaching what happens after you graduate and chances aren't going to play.
Well, in my opinion, great coaches teach a lot more than the techniques or the tactics of their sport. They teach life. They teach life skills, and they take young people and try to give them some guidance and some inspiration. And we're all looking for that. That doesn't stop when you're young. It doesn't stop when you're an athlete. Like, every day, I'm looking for someone or something to model myself after, to be inspired by.
When it comes to high school students, those of us who have earned our gray hair always say, wow, it wasn't like that when I was in school. But now you've spent many years, but 3 years as head coach out at Tanca Verde most recently. What's the football atmosphere like now versus when you were playing, when I was in school, things like that?
Sure. 40 years have made a big difference. I think kids are different, and they're coached different. You can't coach kids today the way that I was coached. They're not receptive to it. There's so many more distractions for them. I had very few distractions. I was able to really focus on the things I needed to focus on. These kids today are getting pulled in so many different directions, and they have so many different demands on them. It's much tougher to be a kid now than it is when I was, an athlete. I don't think that you can coach kids as hard as I was coached. But I do tell my players, never shy away from hard coaching. And I coached my kids very hard. I coached the kids that I had like I was coached, because I knew the result that came from that. And I tell them, you don't have to worry about a coach getting on you. You don't have to worry about a coach challenging you or yelling at you. You need to embrace that. When you need to worry is when he stops yelling at you, when he stops correcting you, when he stops fixing your mistakes, because that's an indication that you've worn him out. He's given up on you.
I remember that from when I was in high school. I ran track, and that was the way my coach was. If he wasn't talking to you, there was a problem.
Well, when I was a kid and when I was being coached, you were mainly criticized and had mistakes fixed, and you very rarely got a pat on the back for success. It's much different today. You have to reinforce the good things that are being done. And I believe that, and I embrace that. I think it's the improvement of coaching. When I'm coaching, I look at every practice rep, every game rep as an opportunity to either fix a mistake or praise success. And I don't let any of them pass me by.
It sounds like you would be a proponent for every kid to get involved in some kind of organized sports. You may not end up as Jerry Rice from a college most people haven't heard of, Hall of Fame NFL, but it sounds like you're a believer that sports teach a lot of life lessons that you carry all the way through.
Well, this week is the NFL draft is going to be on Thursday afternoon. A kid I coached at Sal Point High School, Bijan Robinson, who had a absolutely amazing career from when he was a baby, has always been special. Came through Sal Point High School and was, the most remarkable football player to ever come through our town. Went on to a fabulous career at Texas, and now is going to be a first-round draft choice. And, by, Thursday morning, he's going to wake up as a college kid. By Thursday night, he's going to be a multimillionaire. The kid he's so easy to cheer for. He's so easy to get behind and to love because he's everything that you want in an athlete and in a person. But all the kids who've played the game, all the kids who've come through this town, there's one of those.
Yeah, they are one in a million very often if you think about all the kids who've played all the different sports and things like that. And sure, we know his name, but we don't know the guys who were blocking for him or any of that.
You don't. And even for someone as talented as Bijan, who's been blessed by God with these amazing physical skills, and then who couples that with this amazing character and personality and all these things that make us admire him, there's no guarantees for him either. There's this prospective look into the future and hope and expectations. Nothing is guaranteed for Bijan any more than it is for any of the rest of us.
Kid comes to you or a parent comes to you and says, my son or daughter really wants to insert sport here. But the reality is they're just not that talented. They're not that athletic. What advice do you give them? Yes, have them participate in that sport and participate in multiple sports. I think it's super important for kids to not get too solely focused on any one thing. Be diverse, get a lot of different experiences, be around a lot of different people, take all the great things that you love about whatever it is you're doing or the people you're around. Also remember the things that you don't care for or the things that you didn't like about the way you were maybe treated or experienced, and remember those things so that you don't repeat them, in somebody else's life. But yeah, I think that and regardless of what it is, whether it doesn't even have to be sports, join a club, be a part of something where you're around other people. Your contribution is part of a bigger picture. And it teaches all those elements of life that will ultimately make you successful in whatever it is you're doing. Since we're talking about sports, as we wrap this up, what's your favorite sports memory? It might not be the big touchdown. It might be something else. What's your favorite sports memory? Well, there was plenty of game time events. There was plenty of plays or specific catches or anything like that are in my memory. There's games. There's big games. I have to say that what we're doing, that I never played on a team that lost to Arizona State. That's a good thing. Every time that I took the field against Arizona State, we left the field as winners. So that's important to me. But really the most important thing is, and the most important memory is my teammates. And I think that comes down to another one of those life's lessons, is that relationships are really the most important thing in our life. And so the relationships I have with those teammates and had at the time and continue to have, and watching, some of my teammates at times struggle through life and have hard times. And then others go on to amazing achievements, like in whatever their career or profession might have been. None of us are judging or comparing anybody else. We all just love each other and we admire that time we spent together. I had amazing teammates who supported me and cheered for me and
and raised me up when I succeeded and picked me up when I fell down. And that's really my truest, most treasured memory.
All right. Well, thanks for spending some time with us.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
That was former University of Arizona football player Jay Dobyns talking with AZPM's Christopher Conover. And that's it for this episode of More Than a Game. Join us next time as we learn about some of Arizona's most extreme endurance sporting events. The show is produced and mixed by Zach Ziegler. Our news director is Christopher Conover. Our logo was designed by A.C. Swedberg. Thanks to our marketing team for their help in launching this podcast. This show is part of the AZPM podcast family. You can find all of our podcasts, news, and video productions at azpm.org. I'm Tony Perkins. See you next time.